Hello everyone, welcome to What If Issei Was Abandoned, Died, and Gets Reincarnated to the familiar of Zero Movie 1. Before we start, please go support God Primordial for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistake in character's gender, but of course Issei is a male. Prologue. Underworld meeting room. At this moment a meeting was being held because the seraph Gabriel was kidnapped by the Chaos Brigade. Of all the angels they were the most worried, although the current security all he wanted was to increase his harem of beautiful girls. Eric Hayadu. Eric, hey, has anyone seen my useless brother? Everyone fell silently, noticing that a certain chestnut was missing, causing many to get upset. Aquino, where could that useless guy be? Surzex, Rias, I told you to bring your entire entourage. Rias, I had left a message on his phone telling him not to miss it. Eric, let me call him. At that point, the black-haired man took out his cell phone and began to dial his brother's number, but the call did not come through. Eric, I'm sure his phone is off. Rosweiss, let me try to call him with a magic circle. The albino made a magic circle appear in her ear, but it instantly disappeared. They didn't expect that. Rosweiss, but what? Azazel, Rias, try to locate him with your pieces to go for him, since we are wasting a lot of time. At that, the red-haired girl began to concentrate on finding out where her servant was. Upon finding him, she made a magic circle appear on her feet, but like the other magic circle, it disappeared. Odin, it seems that the brat is inside a barrier. Irina, and what do we do? At that, a certain black-haired lowly touched Rias's back and then made a dimensional gap appear on the table, and they looked at what the brown-haired boy was doing. What they could see was the silhouettes of two people running at high speed. The sound of metal clashing repeatedly could also be heard. After a few seconds they could see who was fighting. One of them was a certain brown-haired, but it was seen that he was very injured. A little blood was falling from his forehead. He had one eye closed, and it could be seen that he had a very deep sword wound. And not to mention the rest of his body, he had many cuts from which his blood was coming out. He looked agitated and that at any moment he would fall, while his opponent looked in good condition, somewhat agitated and with a few cuts. But it could be noticed that he was winning, but they managed to recognize him. Alcler was one of the most wanted in the supernatural world, and apparently he joined the Chaos Brigade. Now they understood why the barrier did not allow them to go to that place. Although the question would be why someone like Alcler was fighting against someone as useless as Issei. In the fight. Alcler, I see you're already reaching your limit. Issei, what good is it to lie if it's true? Alcler, ha ha ha, I like you boy, tell me, would you like to join the Chaos Brigade? Issei, what's the reason for that question? Alcler, we have eyes and ears everywhere to find people who could join us, and you are promising. Plus you would distance yourself from those who push you aside. The brown-haired boy began to think about the offer. It was certainly somewhat tempting, since ever since he joined the supernatural world they have treated him like a nuisance. Even now that he rescued Gabriel, she stabbed him in the side with a spear of light. Gabriel, who was hiding in some trees, was worried that she would be kidnapped again, but now no one would know where she was. For those who were observing all this, they were somewhat nervous since they would not know what to do if the brown-haired boy betrayed them. But to everyone's surprise, the brown-haired boy raised one of his swords while having a serious look. Issei, it is true that the supernatural has not treated me well, so some time ago it decided that it would fight to protect the human world, and the fact that I rescued it was because it was near this place, and for a moment I could feel its aura, and I went to see what was happening. Only for that I saved it, since she and other people have been approaching it for a long time just to get to my brother. In fact, if she hadn't stabbed me with that dagger of light, I would have given you more of a fight. But because of her tantrum, I find myself in this situation. The blonde could only lower her head in shame and sadness, since that was true. Because she threw a tantrum and stabbed the brown-haired boy. It was the reason they were discovered and the reason why Issei is all injured. Alcler, so the negotiations are over. I would have liked to have you as a partner, since you were the first one who made me excited for a fight. Issei, it's also a shame that you're part of the enemy. Maybe we would have gone somewhere to have some drinks. At that, both become serious, since the next attack will decide who survives, so the albino makes his claws grow a little more and a silver aura surrounds him. while Issei was surrounded by an aura of fire and put his two swords in attack position. The spectators were very tense, and some did not like what they were about to see. Gabriel was shedding a few tears as an innocent person could lose his life because of him, but a tear fell from his chin, and when he hit the ground the two opponents launched themselves against each other and shouted their final attacks. Alcler, Claws of the Abyss. Issei, Eclipse Dragon. Both attacks collided, creating a large curtain of dust, although one of Issei's swords flew far away. When the curtain of dust cleared they could see who won the match, but Issei was not the winner. Gabriel brought his hands to his mouth to avoid screaming in horror at seeing the brown-haired man being pierced. The other spectators were shocked by that, but certain people couldn't stand to see that and ended up fainting, which were Rosweiss, Irina and Tsubaki. For his part, Eric clenched his fists too tightly, which caused his hands to start bleeding, but they saw how the albino raised his other hand with the intention of ripping off Issei's head. But the brown-haired man, using his last strength, held Alcler's arm with his free hand, and with the other he placed his sword on the albino's neck with the intention of decapitating him. Alcler, how is it possible that you have that strength? Issei, I have this strength because I fought until I have nothing left, and you are a threat that I must eliminate. Alcler, in that case, let's see who dies first. At that, the albino makes his arms be surrounded by that dark aura, which he takes advantage of so that a large amount of energy will pass through the brown-haired boy, making him vomit a lot of blood, but even so he did not let go. On the contrary, he increased his aura of fire and began to apply more force to his sword, but without noticing how his appearance changed. Issei, I have to use all the strength I have left. Alcler, I can feel his sword about to cut my neck. It seems that I will finally be defeated. Those were his last thoughts as he then felt his neck being cut and his body becoming numb. The funny thing is that he didn't feel pain like I expected. It seems that the boy had compassion for him even when they were in a fierce life or death fight. All of this was seen by Gabriel, who as soon as the fight ended quickly went to where the brown-haired boy was, who fell to his knees and was beginning to have difficulty breathing. The blonde tried to use healing magic, but it was barely doing anything. Issei, don't bother, whether you like it or not, I'm going to die. The blonde just lowered her head in resignation. She felt useless for not being able to save the person who rescued her. The brown-haired boy with his last strength made a magic circle appear from which he took out a wooden box and gave it to Gabriel. Issei, the reason I found you was because I was passing through the area looking for something that was difficult for me to find. Can you take this to Tannen? He knows who it is for, and it makes me sad that I cannot deliver it personally. By this point Alcler's body had already disappeared from the light in particular, so Issei's blood fell in greater quantity, so he doesn't have much time left. The blonde just acknowledged as a river of tears came out of her eyes. The brunette began to lose her senses, and when he blinked he could see his parents giving him a proud smile. Gora, you did very well. Mickey, I'm proud of you, son. The brown-haired boy could only give a big smile, as he had wanted someone to say those words to him for a long time. And in that way Issei Haida left this world, leaving a painful lesson to those close to him. Underworld, meeting room. PM. That was the sound the current security made as he slammed his left fist into the wall, while his hair covered his eyes. Eric, I was stupid. Aquino, what did you say? Eric, I was a complete stupid for treating my brother like that. Rias, don't say that, besides he was just a... Eric, complete that sentence, Gremory, and I won't be held responsible for the consequences. Zenobia, but he died like a useless person. The black-haired man gave a strong knee to the stomach of the blue-haired girl with the green lock, who knelt down to try to get air. Eric, that useless man you're talking about is my brother, who was able to defeat one of the most wanted in the supernatural world, without the need for a sacred gear. He did it with the little use of magic he had, while you have a powerful sword that you can't use properly in combat, and you only attack brute force. So what would have happened if it had been you instead of my brother? Tell me, what do you think the result would have been? No one said anything, since that was true. The brown-haired boy proved to be stronger than most in the room. Possibly only the leaders were the only ones who would have done something to him, Without anything else to say, it was decided to end the meeting. Michael, I think it would be best to end this meeting, since we already know where my sister is. In that they see the image again, and saw how Gabriel hugged Issei's body that disappeared in particles of light, while apologizing for not being of help. Michael, I wonder how Griselda will take the news that Issei died in combat protecting Gabriel? In an unknown place. A certain chestnut tree was in that place. I felt nothing, no pain, no heat or cold. I wondered if this is what it feels like to be dead. You are the fourth to arrive in my domain. Hearing that voice that exuded power and respect, he opened his eyes, noticing that in front of him was a being of practically unlimited power. Issei, where am I? In my domain, and as I said, you are the fourth to arrive. Issei, is there a way I can return to my world? Why do you want to come back? If they consider you dead there? The chestnut did not know what to answer. That was true. Now they must believe that he is dead, and if he returns perhaps they will continue to treat him the same, although there were those who were his friends and he could not say goodbye to them. I'll tell you this, I can't leave you in this place, so I'll send you to another world where you can start from scratch. Issei, seriously. I'm just warning you that some things are about to happen in that place that will put it in danger. You will decide whether to intervene or not. Issei, I just have one question, are they humans? Most of them do, and there are also beings that would be from fantasy like elves, goblins, and so on. Issei, then I will help them. I had already promised that I would save the humans and I do not intend to retract. In that case, have it. A small glow appeared in front of the chestnut. When the light disappeared he could see a katana, and from what he could see it was better than the ones he had before, which by the way he barely realized he didn't have. I hope you like this. Issei, don't worry, this is actually much better than what I had before. I will send you near one of the people who will be important. The brown-haired boy just acknowledged and then turned into a sphere of light and flew out of the place. What I do for entertainment. In the world of Zero-Node Tsukaima, Royal Palace, there was a purple-haired girl walking through the back where there was a beautiful garden. She was walking calmly until she heard the sound of a cannon, but it came from the sky. When she looked up she could see a person falling at high speed against the ground. Before she used her magic to prevent that person from falling, someone called her. Agnes, princess, are you okay? We heard the sound of a cannon, and we came to see that you are okay. And again, before he said anything, everyone saw how something crashed brutally against the ground and raised a curtain of dust. Immediately the guards placed themselves in a defensive position for any attack. When the dust dispersed they could see Issei in a crater with his shape. He looked somewhat injured. His clothes looked torn, although the most striking thing was the hole in front of him. But he was still breathing and it was clear that he needed medical attention. Agnes, what should we do with the princess? Henrietta, take him to one of the vacant rooms for medical attention, but have guards outside the room. Agnes, as you command. At that point, some guards carefully lifted the brunette's body. But when they saw his back, they saw that he also had a hole that connected perfectly with the one on his chest, and they just wondered how that was done. Issei began Issei Hayate's adventure in a world full of magic, and he will have to overcome himself in certain ways to become stronger. But along the way he will meet people who will become something special to him. Chapter 1. It had been 3 days since Issei arrived in a new world. During that time he had been unconscious. But right now he was showing signs of waking up. When he opened his eyes everything he could see was blurry. He couldn't even hear well because of a ringing in his ears. After a few seconds he was able to recover and noticed the state he was in. He had several bandages on some parts of his body. He even felt that he had one on his forehead, and when he put a hand to that place I discovered that he did have them. Issei, where am I? You are in the royal castle of the kingdom of Tristain. Seeing where the voice came from, the brown-haired man saw an elderly man dressed in a butler's suit. Issei, how did I get to this place? The princess was walking through the garden when the sound of a cannon was heard and some guards went to see what it was about, and as soon as they arrived you fell from the sky in a violet shape. Let me tell you that you left a crater in your perfect shape. Issei, I apologize for that, I didn't mean to make such a fuss. Don't worry, in fact I'm curious to know how you got those wounds you had. Issei, I faced a very powerful demon, which I was able to cut off its head since it attacked my torso, and I just took the opportunity and did it. Wow, that's surprising, young man. Issei Hayadu, but I could only say Issei. Understood, young Issei, my name is Rodrigue. Issei, it's a pleasure too. Rodrigue, since I see that you are better now, I think you should go see the queen to clarify that you are not an enemy. Issei, sounds good to me, and I'd also like to thank you for helping me. At that, the brown-haired boy began to get up from the bed, but he remembered how his clothes were and he couldn't appear there. In fact, he could see that his clothes were still damaged, so he made a magic circle on his feet and began to go up, changing his clothes. Rodrigue, wow, that was surprising. Issei, well, that's something I learned from where I came from. The two of them left the room and went to the queen's office, although the brown-haired boy drew attention due to what he was wearing, although the maids gave him a few flirtatious glances, which made him a little uncomfortable since he wasn't used to that kind of looks. But it didn't take long for them to reach their destination. Rodrigue, your majesty, our guest has already woken up and is out here. Marianne, please let him in. At that, the butler made a small bow and went to tell the brown-haired man to enter. Upon entering, the brown-haired man could see the queen with her daughter and what appeared to be her personal guard. When he was in front of them, the brown-haired man knelt on one knee to give thanks. Issei, thank you very much for saving my life. Marianne, you don't need to do that. Besides, it was my daughter who ordered that medical attention be given. Issei, even so, I am very grateful for what he did for me. Plus the look his guard was giving me told me that I had to kneel or something bad would happen to me. Both the queen and princess turned to look at Agnes, who looked away. Marianne, I still want to know how she ended up in that state. Issei, explaining it would be complicated, so I'd better show you. At that, the brown-haired boy made a magic circle appear on the queen's desk and began to show them certain memories he had so they could understand his situation. The XD world. In these 3 days, certain things had also happened that were a great surprise to many. To begin with, at the Qua Academy it was a great surprise since it was reported that Issei was killed, but it was not in a good way. Flashback. The Kendo girls were looking for Issei to, according to them, teach him a lesson to do perverted things, since they had stolen his underwear and had found a pencil with his name on it, and they believed that it was him. So that's why they were looking for him, but they didn't find him. But they saw his brother who was going to his classroom, and was going up the stairs, and they ran to ask him where Issei was. Kates, excuse me, Eric-kun, we want to ask you something. Eric, what do you want to know? Murayama, do you know where your useless pervert brother is? The black-haired boy, upon hearing what they were saying to his brother, began to get very upset. Eric, he didn't come to school today and he won't eat anymore. Kates, don't tell me he finally got expelled. No wonder that useless guy stole our clothes. The black-haired man only got angry. Even someone who was gossiping saw how some of his veins stood out. Eric, it's not because of that. Murayama, don't tell me he was arrested because he tried to abuse a girl. At this point, the black-haired man was about to release his aura when he realized that they always spoke badly of his brother, and he never did anything to make them leave him alone. Eric, he won't come because he just... Kates, what did you say? Eric, that he was murdered 2 days ago. In fact, I myself saw how he was passed from side to side, all for trying to prevent a capricious woman from being kidnapped, and instead of helping him, he only made it easier for that damn man to kill my brother. And don't say those things about my brother since you didn't know him, and you just let yourself be carried away by what others said. The black-haired man had exploded and said something that left those present stunned. Since it was true that none of them knew the brown-haired man, they just went with the flow of what others said. But hearing that he died to prevent a person from being kidnapped was something difficult to process. But a girl had heard all that and could only cry, holding her chest and leaning against the wall to keep from falling. Ruby, is Issei dead? The blonde didn't know what to do and just ran away from the place so that no one would see her cry. End of flashback. From that day on, things changed at the academy. No one said anything behind anyone's back, and a certain pair of perverts were found tied to a tree with clear marks showing that they had been brutally beaten. Another thing that was a surprise was that the brown-haired boy had some kind of relationship with the Dragon Queen Tiamat. This information was told by Gabriel because he felt responsible for Issei's death and wanted to deliver that box in person. Flashback. The Archangel was in the dragon's territory, as she had requested the presence of a certain ex-dragon king. After waiting a few minutes, the blonde saw a large purple dragon land in front of her. Tannen, Seraph Gabriel called me? Gabriel, yes indeed, could you take me to the owner of this box? The dragon lowered his head to see what he had inside. When he found out what he had, he was surprised not to see the brown-haired boy. Tannen, I'd be happy to take you, but where's the boy? The blonde just lowered her head as a few tears came out of her eyes. It was very painful for her to remember that, to which Tannen understood what happened to the brown-haired boy, so he gave a sad sigh. Tannen won? Gabriel, yes, he used all his strength and in the end he succeeded. The great dragon gave another sigh and looked up at the sky of the underworld as if he wanted to see something. After a while of being there, he lowered one of his hands and placed it in front of the blonde. Tannen, okay, I'll take you to that person. To which the blonde climbed onto the dragon's hand and he put her on one of his shoulders and began to fly to reach a certain dragoness. Tannen, once you deliver the box, I recommend you leave. Gabriel, why? Tannen, because that person had a somewhat intimate relationship with the boy and I'm sure he'll have a fit of rage and you won't want to be near the place. Gabriel, I understand. For the rest of the trip they remained silent, although the blonde did not notice that they entered the forest of the familiars, not until Tannen landed near a cave. Tannen, Tiamat, come out for a moment, I have something to tell you. At that point they began to hear someone approaching. When the blonde looked towards the cave, she could see a very beautiful woman with light blue hair, and if they looked closely they could see that she was wearing a little makeup. Tiamat, what's wrong, Tannen? Tannen, first of all, there is someone who wants to leave you something. At that point the blonde approached the sky blue-haired girl and handed her the box she was carrying. The dragon was a little confused, but when she opened the box she got a big surprise. Tiamat, this is my mother's gift. I thought I would never see it again, even after that stupid lizard stole it from me. How did they find it? Tannen, it was the boy. He turned out that his grandfather found it on one of his trips and gave it to the brat and asked me if I knew what it was and how to fix it. You should have seen his face when I told him that was yours and how excited he was to fix it and give it to you as soon as possible. Tiamat, and where is it? I want to thank you. At that Tannen lowered his head and the blonde took a few steps back and avoided looking at the sky blue-haired girl's face. Tannen, here's the other news, which I'm sure will devastate you. Tiamat, did something bad happen to Issei? Gabriel, yes. Tiamat, what happened to him? Are he okay? Where is he? Tannen, the boy fell in combat. The sky blue-haired girl dropped the surprise box, and her eyes began to fill with tears. Tiamat, it's not true, tell me it's not true. Gabriel, unfortunately it's true, he gave me that box and with his last strength he asked me to give it to him. For Tiamat this was too much, so much so that she held her head and began to cry. Tiamat, who did her face? Gabriel, against the criminal Alcler. In fact the fight ended in a draw since both lost their lives. The light blue-haired girl stood up with her legs still shaking, but her eyes were covered by her hair, but you could still see how the tears continued to fall. Tiamat, please leave me alone. At that they both agreed and left the place, leaving the dragon alone. Once at a great distance the blonde wanted to know some things. Gabriel, excuse me, do you know what relationship those two had? Tannen, they were both a couple and loved each other very much. Gabriel, they were a couple? Tannen, that's it. Gabriel, how did you meet? Tannen, when the brat was in his first year of high school and had recently entered the supernatural, more exactly when the Gremry nobility came looking for some relatives. That moment was when they met. Gabriel, so Issei asked him to be his familiar, right? Tannen, that's correct, but she would only accept if the boy defeated her at something. Gabriel, and how did he beat her? Tannen, rock, paper, scissors. Gabriel, really? Tannen, the boy knew he couldn't defeat her in combat, so he decided to make it something that would make them equal. Gabriel, amazing. Tannen, besides, she wasn't his only partner. Gabriel, did you have another one? Tannen, a human girl, according to what she told me. I have saved her from some boys who wanted to do indecent things to her. Gabriel, really? Tannen, that's right. In fact, they both agreed to share it, and they were sure that maybe more girls would be attracted to him, and they were willing to accept that more girls would fall in love with him, as long as their feelings were real and not on a whim. The blonde was very surprised by that, but in the distance some rumblings were heard, and when they looked in that direction, they saw some ice cubes coming out of the ground. Tannen, then I'll tell some dragons to help comfort Tiamat. The blonde could only watch that with sadness, which only increased the guilt she felt for not being able to do anything to save the brunette. End of flashback. In the kingdom of Tristain, royal castle, the chestnut tree had already shown what was necessary so that she did not have to explain some things, although the three women were very surprised by what they saw. Marianne, that was surprising. Henrietta, I have no words. Agnes, amazing. Issei, well, now that there are no doubts, I want to tell you that you have all my loyalty, and I am willing to do any job you give me. The queen did not know what to ask for, but her daughter did. In fact, this could also help her childhood friend. Henrietta, in fact, I have a task that you could do without many complications. Issei, I will do my best to not let her down. Henrietta, I have a friend who attends a magic academy, but she's not very good at magic. Do you think you could help her with her problem? Issei, I'll do my best, even if it means I have to teach you many of my mana control skills. Henrietta, I think that's perfect. Issei, when can I go out? Marianne, if you go now, you'll arrive around dusk. Issei, in that case I'll leave immediately. Marianne, Agnes, please take him and explain to the director what young Issei's job will be. Agnes, as your majesty wished. So both young people began to walk with the purpose of going to a certain magical academy that will only mean the beginning of many things, both good and bad. Chapter 2. It was almost night when Issei and Agnes had arrived at Tristan's magic academy and found themselves in front of Director Osmond. Osmond, so the princess sent this young man to help Miss Vali with her magic control. Agnes, that's right. Osmond, well, if it is an order from His Majesty, I have no objection. In fact, it came at a good time. Issei, why do you say that? Osmond, because today was the day of the invitation to relatives, and the relative that Miss Vali invoked was a bit peculiar. Issei, I understand. Osmond, plus her older sisters are with her, as they wanted to know what kind of familiar she would summon. Issei, well, that doesn't bother me. Agnes, could you take us to where Miss Vali is? Osmond, sure, follow me. The old man got up from his desk and began to guide the two young men to the room of a certain explosive mage. On his way, the brown-haired boy could not help but stare at the two moons that were there and wondered what else would be different in this world. On his way, they could see how a blonde boy was flirting with a brown-haired girl who looked a little younger than him. But for Issei that did not matter, and he just continued on his way. He also saw a red-haired girl who was being flirtatious with another student, and as the above did not give it importance. When they arrived at the room, the director knocked on the door. After a few seconds, the door was opened by a short pink-haired girl. Louise, Director Osmond, what can I do for you? Osmond, there are some people who want to talk to you. As soon as they entered, the voices of two other women were heard. Eleanor, what do you want to talk about? Katla, Sama, can you calm down for a moment? At that, the three of them entered the room, but a yellow blur hugged the brown-haired boy tightly. Ruby, Issei, is it really you? Is it really you? Issei, Ruby. The brown-haired boy was confused, as he didn't expect his girlfriend to be in that place, so the only thing he could do was hug her to calm her down. Issei, okay, Ruby, I'm here now and I won't leave your side. Ruby, do you promise me? Issei, I promise. After the blonde calmed down, they began talking. Agnes, as I mentioned to Director Osmond, here young Issei will be Miss Vali's private instructor. Louise, who ordered that? Issei, it was the princess who gave the idea and the queen gave me permission. The Vali sisters did not know what to say, since those were orders from royalty, and they could not oppose. Louise, and how will you help me? Issei, in mana control. That surprised them a lot. The director was very interested in that since he was a great magician in his youth, and finding out that there was another way to use magic intrigued him. The Valier sisters did not know what to say, since that could help the youngest of them a lot, since it was no secret that she could not do a spell without it ending up exploding, but the red-eyed blonde was very amazed. Ruby, so in the end you were able to master it, right? Issei, that's it. Ruby, could you show us? At that the brown-haired boy moved away a little and made an aura of fire and lightning appear on his body. Issei, surprised? To which they could only nod since they didn't know what to say. At that the brown-haired boy deactivated his aura and was once again hugged by his girlfriend. Ruby, you are warmer. Agnes, well, with everything cleared up, I'm leaving. I have to return to His Majesty. Osmond, I'm retiring too, I'm old and I want to rest. So one by one they left the room, leaving only Issei, Louise and Ruby, but the brown-haired boy had a doubt. Issei, well, where will we sleep? Louise, the bed is only for 2 people and I have something for you to sleep on. Normally she wouldn't behave like that, but since the brunette was, so to speak, her private teacher, she couldn't treat him like a commoner, and since the blonde was his girlfriend, she didn't want to provoke him and make him do very demanding things. Issei, well, there's no remedy. At that the chestnut tree made a magic circle appear from which emerged a sofa large enough for him to rest well. Issei, well, let's go to sleep since tomorrow will be a tough day for both of us. Ruby, are you going to train me too? The pink-haired girl could see how the blonde's face was somewhat pale, and that worried her. Issei, from what I see, you are his familiar, so you will have to learn how to defend yourself in case I am not there. After saying that, the brown-haired boy lay down on the couch and fell asleep, while the girls were a little nervous about what would happen to them early tomorrow morning. Without saying anything, they both lay down to sleep and have energy. The next day, it was 5 a.m. Some girls were sleeping peacefully, but Issei, get up young ladies, it's already daylight. Both girls jumped and fell out of bed. Louise, what's wrong with you? It must be barely 5 in the morning. But the brown-haired boy had a serious face, while emanating a strong aura full of seriousness. Issei, I said we would start training today, and I don't plan on going back on it. You have 5 minutes to get ready, I'll be out of the room. As the brown-haired boy left the room, the pink-haired girl was a little irritated, but a certain blonde made her calm down. Ruby, we better get him married, because when he gets serious he's a bit scary. The pink-haired girl didn't say anything since her familiar knew her better. After a few minutes both girls had already changed their clothes. Luckily the blonde had sports clothes since she was summoned when she went to the gym, while Louise put on the academy uniform. When they left the room they saw the brown-haired boy staring at his wristwatch. Issei, alright, 30 more seconds and I would have taken them out even if they were dressed. Looking better at the brown-haired girl, I noticed that the pink-haired girl was not wearing appropriate clothing for what they were going to do. Issei, excuse me Louise, don't you have any clothes to do sports? Louise, no, because we don't have that kind of activities. The brown-haired boy sighed. Maybe later he can go to the town he saw when he came and bought him some suitable clothes for exercising and a weapon for his girlfriend, since the queen gave him some money so he could be calm. Issei, well, let's go outside to start. By the way, what time is breakfast? Louise, at 7:30. Issei, okay, we'll practice until 7. Ruby/Louise, what? Both girls turned pale and began to tremble. Ruby, isn't it too hard for us, honey? Issei, honey, I used to get up at 4:15 a.m., then I would shower and have breakfast in less than 15 minutes. I'm being soft on you. The girls didn't say anything else, although for the first time Louise cursed her childhood friend. 2 hours later, Louise and Ruby could be seen walking heavily towards the dining room. When they arrived they attracted a little attention, but they didn't give it importance, and went to their places to eat something and rest. When they got to the table they sat down, letting themselves fall, While Issei looked calm, a little agitated but fine, and went to sit down. When he got to his place, he saw how Ruby had her head on Katla's shoulder and Louise on Eleanor's shoulder. Katla, weren't you a little harsh in your practice today? Issei, no, I was actually soft. Eleanor, but they look very tired. Issei, it's normal that they are like that since they are not used to physical effort, and that's why they are so tired. Eleanor, well, you're right about that. Issei, also tell me, when was the last time you heard of a noble exercising to stay in shape? They both started to think about that, and no one came to mind. In fact, the vast majority of nobles are overweight. Even their father looked like he was gaining a few kilos. Then they heard something fall and saw a blonde boy scolding a maid. Issei, I'll be back in a moment. The brown-haired boy got up from his place, and with great speed he arrived at the place just in time to prevent the blonde boy from hitting the maid. Issei, what's the problem? The blonde only saw the brunette's face, so he didn't see the sword he had on his waist. Gucci, let go of me, commoner. The brown-haired boy didn't like what she said, but he just increased his grip a little and turned to look at the girl who was accompanying him. Issei, hey boy, what happened with the brunette girl last night? Did they break up? The blonde tensed up at that, and started to get nervous at the look the blonde was giving him. Montmorency, what is Gucci talking about? Gucci, I don't know what you're talking about. It's better if we go somewhere else to talk. The brown-haired boy saw how both blondes left the place, but he could see how a brown-haired girl crossed his path, so he saw how both girls gave him a hard slap each and left the place, so he went to approach. Issei, a bull hit softer. The blonde didn't like being made fun of, so the only thing he could think of was to challenge the boy in front of him so he wouldn't be made to look ridiculous. Guiche, you seem to enjoy watching beautiful ladies cry. Issei, that's not true. What makes me laugh is seeing how they hit you. Guiche, I will not let you sully my honor. I challenge you to a duel. Issei, I agreed, just say where and when. Guiche, currently near the main entrance. Issei, well, you're taking too long. At that, both began to walk towards that place, but some students also went to see the duel. On the other hand, the Vali sisters and Issei's girlfriend also went out of curiosity to know how the brown-haired boy would fight. When they arrived at the place, the students left a space for them to fight freely. Issei, you're not going to start. Guiche, there is no need for me to dirty my hands with a commoner. At that, the blonde makes the ground start to shine, from which a suit of armor emerged. Guiche, in case you don't know, my name is Guiche de Grayman, the bronze. Issei, interesting, well, my turn. The armor was placed in an attack position, but when it had barely taken a few steps it was split in half. The brown-haired man had moved at a great speed that most of those present could not see, although the blonde was not willing to lose, so he made 5 more armors appear, but little or nothing they could do against Issei. The first one ended without his head in the blink of an eye, the second was split from top to bottom, the third was turned into ashes, the fourth ended with a hole in his chest, and the last was torn to pieces. All the students were in shock. Guiche could not believe what he saw. His Valkyries were destroyed as if nothing. The Valier sisters were very surprised. Although Louise had a bad feeling about her training, on the other hand Ruby had a noticeable blush since her boyfriend looked so cool, and she wanted to give him lots of kisses. Issei, come on, say it. Guiche, I give up. Hearing that, the brown-haired boy sheathed his sword and Ruby went to give him a big hug with a big kiss on his cheek. Issei, Louise, get ready because we're going to the town for some things we'll need. The pink-haired girl could only sigh and mentally regret, just hoping that her next training section wouldn't be too hard. Chapter 3. Half an hour had passed since Issei defeated Guiche. At this moment the brown-haired boy was traveling on a road with Louise and Ruby. The brown-haired boy was driving. The peculiar thing was that they were not alone. Louise's sisters also accompanied them to find out what the brown-haired boy would buy for their sister. They were also accompanied by a light blue-haired girl with glasses and a redhead with tanned skin. Louise, why did they follow us? Kirka, that's Private Zero. Louise, I'm telling you right now that seducing Issei won't help you, he already has a girlfriend. Kirka, and who is it? At that, the red-eyed blonde raised her hand, sending a serious look to the redhead, although the girls who didn't know that were surprised. Kirka, are you his girlfriend? Ruby, second girlfriend to clarify. Louise, leaving aside Kirka's fever, why did you come, Thabita? The redhead looked at the lowly with annoyance, but the light blue-haired girl spoke first. Thabita, that boy is not normal, and I was a little curious to know more about him. After saying that, no one knew what to say, but the older pink-haired girl remembered something she saw in her sister's relative. Katla, now that I remember, Ruby-san, why did you look sad when you arrived and hugged Issei-san while crying? The blonde felt uncomfortable remembering that since she had been through a bad time on that occasion. Ruby, I was in that state because I had found out something that devastated me. Louise, what did they tell you? Ruby, I had heard that Issei had been killed. The girls didn't know what to say, some even turned to look at the brown-haired boy, not understanding anything. Eleanor, but he's here. Ruby, I know, but her brother had said that he had faced a very powerful demon and died in combat. Louise, but how did he meet the princess? Ruby, I haven't been able to talk to him about the subject because I was more focused on training. At the word training, Louise and Ruby lowered their heads in regret, and just hoped that the next practice wouldn't be too demanding. Ruby, she didn't hold back even though she was his girlfriend. Louise, my body still feels heavy. Katla, what did you make them do? Louise, physical training. Eleanor, why is that? Ruby, so that our body becomes stronger and can withstand the burden of using mana, although I think he went a bit overboard. Louise, just a little. Ruby, I say this because I had already seen him train, and what he did was much harder, and I also understand why he made us do that. Kirka, why do you say that? Ruby, once when he was entering by mistake he used more mana than he could handle and I saw how his muscles swelled, his veins stood out, he even spat blood since his body could not withstand the pressure and collapsed. Kirka, wow, this is the first time I've heard of someone collapsing from not being able to bear the magical load. Ruby, well, Issei wasn't born with large reserves of magic, so he looked for another way to be able to use it without complications. Eleanor, and it was then that she discovered that she could use the mana in the environment and mold it into her body so that she could use more magic than she could use naturally. Katla, but that led to him strengthening his body so that he could bear all that magical load. Thabita, amazing. All but Ruby were very surprised to discover the true reason for the physical training. While the girls were talking, the brown-haired boy was focused on the road, although he could also hear the girls' conversation, but he preferred not to intervene. The time would come when he would tell his girlfriend how his death was. Also, he couldn't stop wondering, how is Tiamat? Most likely she is devastated by the news of her death. Maybe he asked Director Osmond how to do the ritual to call a relative. He could still feel that connection, and there is a possibility that when he calls a relative she will appear. After a few minutes they finally arrived at the town. The brown-haired boy was in front looking for what he would buy, although he was holding hands with his girlfriend, since this could be considered a date, although the other girls were a little behind them, although they were somewhat curious to know what the brown-haired boy would buy. Louise, excuse me Issei, what exactly do you want to buy? Issei, clothes for you, so you can exercise since your uniform is not suitable for those activities, and a weapon for Ruby since I will help her so she can use it correctly. The younger pink-haired girl could only sigh. Something told her that she wouldn't be saved from doing more physical activities, although her two companions didn't know what kind of exercises she would have to do for her to have to wear another type of clothing, and they wondered if they could join the training without knowing what they were getting into. After getting the appropriate clothing, they began to look for a place where they could get weapons. They arrived at a blacksmith shop. Outside the shop was a muscular man working on an anvil. When the man approached, he noticed their presence. Blacksmith visits. It's not very common for nobles to come to my shop. Issei, good morning knight, we came to get a good weapon for my girlfriend. Blacksmith, well, you came to the right place. You can see the weapons I have and choose the one you like. Issei, thank you, with your permission. The group then began to look at the weapons in the store. They had to admit that they looked good quality, Then the red-eyed blonde picked up a sword that was in a barrel. It looked rusty, but you could tell that it was still a resident. Issei, did you find something you like? Ruby, yes, in fact, look. The blonde gave the sword to the brunette, who began to examine it in detail, noting that it looked sturdy and the rust was only superficial, so with a little maintenance it would be as good as new. Issei, it has a good weight, can be used with 2 hands, has a good edge and the rust can be removed with a little maintenance. Ruby, then I'll take it. Issei, if you say so. Hey Louise, we already found Ruby's weapon, we are going to pay to return to the academy. Seeing where the younger pink-haired girl was, she was staring at a sword. Issei, does it catch your attention? Louise, well, I've been thinking that maybe I'm not good at magic, but I might be good at other things. Issei, well, it's your decision, although you know that means I'll increase the training. The pink-haired girl tensed a little, but then sighed and answered calmly. Louise, it doesn't matter, I know it will be difficult, but when has anything been easy? At that they took the sword and went to the counter to pay. After the brown-haired boy paid for the weapons they went to the cart and left towards the academy, although the 2 girls stared at their new weapons. Eleanor, why did you take that sword, Louise? Louise, well, it's possible that I'm not good at magic, so maybe I should excel at other things. Katla, I'm glad you think that way, sister, but why did you choose that rusty sword, Ruby-san? Ruby, well, when I was looking for a good weapon, I noticed that this sword suits my fighting wood, and it's not in such bad condition. I just need to remove the rust, and it will be as good as new. I'm glad to know that my new owner thinks that way about me. That voice baffled them since they didn't know where it came from. Down here. Looking down they noticed that the sword was speaking. Ruby, wow, I didn't expect this. Kirka, a talking sword. Greetings, my name is Disfinger, but you can say Disfinger. Ruby, nice to meet you, my name is Ruby. Des, wow, my new owner has potential. Ruby, thanks, although my boyfriend is much better than me. Des, I'm curious to meet him. After a few minutes they had finally arrived at the academy, although as soon as they got off both girls went to change their clothes to continue with the training. The brown-haired boy was waiting outside, but a certain maid approached to talk to him. Nap, sorry. Issei, yes, what can I help you with? Siesta, well, I just wanted to thank you for stopping that noble from hitting me. Issei, I couldn't allow a beautiful girl to be beaten. The brunette blushed a little and said goodbye to the brunette, saying that she had things to do. Des, wow, it's obvious that you are a descendant of that man. Issei, what are you talking about? Des, I'll just tell you this. Watch your back, as it may be that an enemy is responsible for your death. Hearing that, the brunette turned around, seeing that both girls had expressionless faces. Louise, so you're flirting while we're suffering, right? Ruby, just because Tiamat's not around doesn't mean you can be flirtatious. The chestnut took a step back and prepared to run, but... Ruby, Louise, please do the honors. At that, the pink-haired girl raised her magic wand and launched one of her famous explosions. In the distance, someone's scream of pain could be heard, accompanied by the sound of a loud explosion. Chapter 4. It's been a week since Issei started training Louise and Ruby. It has been seen that they have been improving. He had already asked Director Osmond if he could do the familiar summoning ritual. He told him yes, but that it can only be done every 2 weeks, so he will have to wait another week. Another thing to highlight is that Siesta had been handed over to a perverted noble, and when he went to rescue her he did not expect what would happen. Flashback. The brown-haired boy had activated his fire aura and was ready to fight. What he didn't expect was that the nobleman knelt in front of him. Maud, I apologize, Your Divinity, I didn't know you were a descendant of that man. Normally the other person would ask what he was talking about, but the brunette decided to play along, and that way they would resolve things peacefully. Issei, I see you realize who I am. Siesta, who was behind the noble, didn't know what they were talking about. She was going to ask the brunette what was happening, but Issei just won at her, to which she understood that he would explain to her later what happened. Maud, please forgive me. In exchange I will give you the girl you requested and what your ancestor gave to my family to take care of. Issei donate. With the deal done, Siesta went for her things, and when they were getting ready to leave, Count Maud arrived and gave the brown-haired boy a key. Maud, your ancestor told mine that when his descendant appears he will give this to him, since with it he would obtain great power. Now it belongs to you. The brown-haired boy didn't know what to say. The only thing he could do was take the key and leave the property with Siesta. End of flashback. After that, Louise, Ruby, Thabita and Kirka arrived to help them, but it was not necessary, so they just returned to the academy to rest and continue with their routine, although Siesta became very close to the brown-haired boy. But Ruby could see that the maid had fallen in love with her boyfriend, but it was clear that they were authentic feelings. Only Tiamat's approval was needed so that there would be no problems. Louise, hey Issei. Issei, what's wrong? Louise, do you think we can finish early today? Issei, why? Louise, tomorrow is the presentation of relatives and the princess will come. Issei, okay, just for today. Both girls sighed and slumped back tiredly. Issei, by the way, what are you going to do, Ruby? Ruby, I think I could sing, since I'm not good with the sword yet. Louise, do you know how to sing? Ruby, I used to practice, although I don't know what to sing. Issei, I'll take care of that. The next morning, all the students were in front of the academy, and in the distance they could see a carriage approaching. The curious thing was that those pulling the carriage were not simple horses, they were unicorns. When they parked, all the students and teachers knelt down, although Henrietta approached where the director was and Louise was also standing to one side. Osmond, it is an honor to have you here, Your Majesty. Henrietta, please don't have to kneel. At that everyone stood up and the purple-haired girl turned to see her childhood friend. Henrietta, Louise, it's good to see that you're okay. Louise, it's also good to see that you're doing well. Henrietta, from what I can see, you have been training. The pink-haired girl could only give a forced smile since the training was really hard, while a certain blonde had a lost look. Not even being Issei's girlfriend saved her, although the brown-haired boy had something he wanted to ask her later. It was already noon and the second-year students showed their familiars. Montmorency played the violin while his frog danced. Kirka made his familiar that was a salamander demonstrate his great control over fire. Issei, all he did was cover his familiar in roses and bow to it, although Thabita made a flight demonstration with her familiar dragon. All that was missing was for Louise to introduce Ruby. Issei nervous? Ruby anxious. Issei, calm down as normal. The brown-haired boy gave her a kiss for good luck and went up on stage behind Louise. Louise, good afternoon everyone, my name is Louise Françoise Leblanc de la Valliere and my relative would like to dedicate a song to you. After saying that, the pink-haired girl got off the stage, while the blonde sighed to calm down, but a strange melody began to be heard that no one knew, except for two people. Ruby, how I love you, Issei. After finishing singing, many of the spectators were crying, while the blonde turned to look at the brown-haired boy, who just nodded and another melody began to play. Only this time Issei joined Ruby to sing. After finishing that song, they both kissed passionately, to which everyone began to applaud, but out of nowhere the brown-haired boy pushed his girlfriend aside, to block a spear of light that was heading in Henrietta's direction. Agnes, who dares to attack the princess? Oh, so she is the princess, then I will continue looking for the queen. Issei, that voice sounds familiar, don't tell me it's you. In front of them a large shadow landed in front of everyone. When the dust cleared the brown-haired boy could see one of the beings he hated the most. Issei, Kabile. Kabile, I remember you, you are the brother of the Securudii, right? Issei, it's true, although we are not brothers at all. Kabile, I suppose there was some problem between you, but well that doesn't interest me, just tell me, where is the queen? Issei, and you think I'll tell you? I gave my loyalty to the crown of this country, and I don't plan on betraying it. Kabile, in that case I'll make you tell me. After saying that he made a spear of light appear, while the brown-haired boy got into a fighting stance. Issei, if you want to reach the queen, you will have to kill me. After saying that, they both clashed their weapons and began to fight at great speed and with great mastery. Everyone was very surprised by the skill of the two. It was seen that they attacked each other with the intention of killing the other. Ruby saw all this very worried since she could not join the fight, since she did not have her sword and would only be a hindrance. Katla, Ruby-san, Louise, your weapons. Both girls watched as their weapons came flying. When they took them, they were ready to join the fight. She gathered a few guards. Issei, don't get involved in this fight. Ruby, but what are you saying? Issei, only I can fight him. You better make sure nothing happens to the princess since Kabile is not one to fight fair. Everyone who was going to join the fight stopped and walked away, but was waiting for something to happen. Kabile, you look awesome, why don't you join me? You'll get everything you want. Issei, I'm not interested in that. Kabile, in that case I will kill you along with everyone else in this place, although I will probably make that blonde with red eyes my wife. Issei, what did you say? Kabile, maybe she is something of you. Well, that doesn't matter to me. I just hope she remains a virgin, since it will disgust me to touch something already used by an inferior being. The blonde felt disgusted, but before she said anything, the temperature began to rise, to the point that even some guards took off parts of their armor to be cooler. When looking for the source of the heat, they saw how the brunette had increased his fire aura. It seemed that he had become a small volcano due to all the heat that emanated. Issei, present yourself dead. The chestnut began to attack with greater brutality, to the point that Kabile began to have difficulty blocking the attacks. Kabile, how is it possible that I'm being surpassed by a brat? I'm already fed up with you. At that, the fallen one also began to increase his speed. All that could be seen of the fight were the flashes of the weapons colliding, since they did not know how fast they were moving, since in what they saw one attack it seemed like they had already made like 3. Although no one noticed the change in appearance that was happening to Issei. The only ones who noticed it were Ruby, Louise and Henrietta, although the princess was able to recognize those marks and the hair color. Henrietta, that appearance is similar to that man, but that's impossible. Issei-san comes from another world, unless... But his thoughts were interrupted when everyone gasped as the now red-haired man cut off both of the cadre's arms, who in a last attempt tried to use his wings to defend himself, but it was of no use and he could only watch as Issei's sword approached his neck. Issei, die. After cutting off his head, Issei deactivated his fire aura and everyone was able to relax since it wasn't hot. Ruby didn't waste time and went to hug her boyfriend since she was very relieved to see him alive. The others were in amazement, and just watched him walk in their direction like a champion. Everything Issei saw was half blurry since he had gone too far. The last thing he saw was his girlfriend running in his direction before everything went black. Chapter 5. After the battle that Issei had against Kabile, the brown-haired boy was left unconscious because he forced his body to surpass its limits. Because of that, and he suffered some damage, he remained unconscious for 3 days. During that time, Ruby and Louise continued doing their training since they felt like useless for not being able to help the brown-haired boy in that fight, although they were supervised by Eleanor so that they would perform the exercises correctly, while Katlia and Siesta took care of Issei. Henrietta still remained in the academy since in her words she felt safer near Issei, although she also warned her mother what happened and to be more careful in case someone else with bad intentions appeared. It was already noon when Issei began to wake up, but he noticed that he was not sleeping on the sofa, but in Louise's bed. When he looked to the side, he could see Katlia sleeping on the sofa, and around her there were also a few little animals, a very tender scene. Katlia, I see you woke up. Issei, how long was I inconvenienced? Katlia, 3 days. During all that time we were all worried about you. Even the princess wanted to stay and take care of you, but we were able to convince her not to. Issei, I understand. Katlia, Louise and Ruby will come soon to see that you are okay. Issei, I'm glad to hear that. At that, a little lamb tried to get on the bed, so Issei helped him get on. As a thank you, the lamb began to lick his face, and that tickled him. Katlia, I think I better go out so you can change your clothes. To which Issei acknowledged and put the lamb on the floor to get up. When the pink-haired girl left the room, she was able to get out of bed, and the first thing she did was look in the mirror. What a surprise she got when she saw her reflection. Now he was a redhead, just like his eyes. They were no longer honey-colored, they were now reddish-brown, and his muscles had increased a little, but he noticed that he had a scar on his chest, but he preferred to get dressed, and once changed he sat on the couch. Issei, you can come in now. The pink-haired girl opened the door and went to sit next to the red-haired boy, but they didn't know how to start a conversation. Katla, I'm glad to see you're okay. Issei, thank you for worrying about me. Katla, it wasn't just me, my sister Louise, Ruby-san, that maid named Siesta and the princess who were worried because you didn't wake up. Issei, I think it's because my body underwent a great physical change and since it was sudden it took a while to adapt, although I'm glad I woke up today. Katla, today is a special day? Issei, today we can do the familiar summoning ritual and I'm sure I'll be able to bring a certain person. Katla, your first girlfriend, right? Issei, that's right, I want to bring her as soon as possible. From his shirt he pulled out a heart-shaped necklace. Only one side was brown and the other side was blue, but when you open the necklace you can see the photo of a very beautiful light blue-haired woman. Katla, wow, she is beautiful. Issei, yes she is and I miss her a lot. Katla, now that I remember, that Kabile guy mentioned that you have a brother, what happened that made you get angry when he mentioned him? The red-haired boy turned to look at the ceiling as he sighed and remembered the change his brother had when he joined the supernatural. Issei, yes, there were some problems with us, mostly because of the fact that we discovered that the supernatural world exists. My brother entered with the purpose of getting a large harem. While I was not asked, I joined forcibly, just to see if I had something special. Katla, and what did you and your brother have? Issei, my brother turned out to be the bearer of a very powerful sacred gear. While I was only found to have nothing, even my magic reserves were almost zero, which led to me being treated like nobody. Katla, but thanks to that you met Tiamat-san, Ruby-san and surely more people, right? Issei, it's true, one of those people is my childhood friend Irena. In fact, when we were kids I thought she was a boy. Another person is Tsubaki-san, she always defended me when they wanted to hit me for things I didn't do. Also Raswai-san, she had very low self-esteem when we met. Since in her previous job they made fun of her for not having a boyfriend, but I taught her to ignore what others say. There's also Griselda-san, she taught me everything I know about swordsmanship. The pink-haired girl was happy to know that Issei had more people he could count on, since she saw that he had it worse than his little sister, but then she saw how the red-haired boy looked down with a downcast expression. Issei, although I think they must be sad because they think I'm dead, I wish I could communicate with one of them and tell them that I'm okay. The pink-haired girl was curious to know how the former brunette supposedly died, but the door was opened and a tray of water was heard falling to the floor. Ruby Issei. The blonde threw herself into the red-haired man's arms, while Louise and Siesta approached, very relieved to see the red-haired man already awake. Issei, yeah Ruby, I'm fine. I think I just needed to rest because of the force change my body underwent, but now I feel much stronger. Ruby, really? In response she received a kiss on the lips that calmed her, but they didn't notice how Siesta and Louise had a serious face since they felt somewhat jealous, although Katla had a beautiful smile at her little sister's expression, although she also felt a certain attraction to the red-haired man, since she was surprised by the determination and ferocity he showed in the fight. Issei, by the way, I got lost while I was unconscious. Louise, after your fight we discovered that the thief Fouquet entered the academy vault and stole the staff of destruction. Issei, have you caught her yet or do you need my help? Ruby, don't worry, that same day a group was formed to catch that thief. Louise, those of us who went were Kirchi, Thabita, Miss Longueville, me and Ruby. Issei, didn't you have any complications? Ruby, when we arrived at the place, no, but when we already had that blessed Fouquet staff, he appeared with the golden land. Louise, it was a bit complicated to face the golden, but Ruby destroyed it using the staff of destruction. Ruby, the funny thing is that the thief turned out to be Miss Longueville. Issei, the director's secretary, the one with green hair. Ruby, that's it. Louise, although Ruby said bad words when she defeated her. Issei, what did you say? Ruby, you promised not to get angry. Issei, I promise. Ruby, what I said was, in your face, Hitch. The red-haired boy just shook his head, while the blonde was very embarrassed. Issei, Ruby, I wouldn't have said that. Louise, you see. Issei, I would have said buck your bucking mother, Green Goblin. The girls had somewhat curious faces. But without knowing it, Princess Henrietta and Agnes came to see Issei's condition, but they arrived at the moment when the red-haired man said that rude thing. A little later, Issei, Louise, Ruby, Henrietta, Agnes, Siesta, Director Osmond, Catlia, Eleanor, Kirchi, Thabita, and Professor Colbert were gathered in the academy courtyard. They were curious about what kind of familiar the red-haired man would summon, although Ruby already had an idea. Issei. Your familiar one. Who is inside my mind and heart? Respond to my call and offer me your help with your beautiful smile. I summon you. When the chant ended, a bright glow appeared that shielded those present. When the glow ended, the back of a light blue-haired woman could be seen. Little by little, she began to turn her face, but before she could say anything, she heard a certain voice that she thought she would never hear again. Issei, Tiamat, are you okay? The sky blue-haired girl didn't answer. Instead, she looked in the direction where the voice came from. When she saw who it was, she was in for a big surprise. It was that young man she had fallen in love with, and she had been told that he died in combat. But now she had him in front of her. His hair and eyes may have changed color, but his face and aura showed that it was the same one. With shaky steps, the dragon approached the boy. When she was in front of him, she gently placed one of her soft hands on one of his cheeks. It was warm as she remembered. Then she felt the red-haired man put his hand on hers and began to make circles with his thumb. Only one person she knew did that. Issei, it's me, Tiamat. You don't know how much I miss you, and I would have liked to give you your gift in person. The light blue-haired girl no longer had any doubts. He was her Issei, her beloved Issei, so she hugged him tightly while crying. Issei, okay, calm down, I'm with you now. Tiamat, is this not a dream or an illusion? Issei, if that were the case, then I wouldn't be able to do this. The red-haired boy gently took the light-haired girl's chin and gave her a tender kiss. Unbeknownst to them, a small glow covered them, thus sealing the summoning pact. Although some girls who were present were somewhat jealous, although they did not realize it, only Ruby was normal since it was nothing new to her. Chapter 6. A few hours had passed since Tiamat arrived. At this moment all the students and teachers were in a large hall since the defeat of Kabile and the capture of Fukia were being celebrated. It would have been celebrated before, but because one of the participants of those events were not there, it was decided to wait so that he could also celebrate. At this moment everyone was having fun in their own way. Then the arrival of Louise and Issei was announced, but the red-haired boy came accompanied by his two girlfriends, each of whom was wearing a beautiful dress, yellow with red details in the case of Ruby, light blue and navy blue in the case of Tiamat, Louise a pink one with white. While Issei wore an elegant black tuxedo with a red tie. Both men and women blushed when they saw them, but ignored them and went with Henrietta, and next to her was Agnes. But she looked somewhat relaxed, and next to her was Durf, who saw everything. Durf, you look very relaxed. Agnes, with Issei down around I can relax a little. Durf, you have a lot of confidence in the boy, why is that? Agnes, after what he did a few days ago I realized that he is much stronger than me, and that he was willing to give his life to protect Princess Henrietta and her mother. Durf, I'm not going to deny that, although it was clear that he didn't fight at 100%. Agnes, what are you talking about? Durf, when he was fighting he didn't perform any special attacks, he only limited himself to attacking and defending. In fact, he only used his electric fire aura and nothing else. Before Agnes could ask, she saw Issei and the others arrive. Issei, good night, princess. Henrietta, good night, Issei, I see you are happier. Issei, that's because I was able to meet again with a very special person to me. Tiamat, good evening, my name is Tiamat, the Dragon Queen of Karma and Chaos. Henrietta, nice to meet you, my name is Henrietta, I am the princess of this kingdom. Agnes, I'm part of the royal guard. Tiamat, nice to meet you. At that point, a dance song began to play, so the girls who were near the red-haired man approached to dance. Issei, may I have this piece? Ruby, with pleasure. At that the two began to dance while smiling at each other. Ruby, I'm glad to be with you again. Issei, I'm sorry for making you believe that I was dead. Ruby, it doesn't matter, I know it wasn't your fault, let's just enjoy these moments. The blonde rested her head on the red-haired man's right shoulder as they continued dancing. When the song was about to end, the red-haired man spun his girlfriend around and kissed her on the lips. When they returned with the others, it was Tiamat's turn. When the blue-haired woman was with the red-haired man, she hugged him by the neck while Issei took her by the waist as they looked into each other's eyes with much love. Issei, I can see that you've improved, you don't step on my feet anymore. Tiamat, after our first dance, when I was gradually becoming a freshman and noticing that I had lost my touch when dancing, I began to practice privately. Issei, wow, that's interesting. The blue-haired girl put her ear to the red-haired boy's chest so that she could hear the Latins of her heart. Tiamat, I like the sound of that. Issei, because you are with me. Tiamat, also, although with this I can confirm that you are truly with me and it is not a dream. Issei, I also really like being with you, like being with Ruby and the other people who truly cared about me. Tiamat, Issei, how did you say? Issei, this isn't the place to talk about that, but I promise that when the time comes I will tell you everything. The two continued dancing, and as he did with Ruby, the red-haired man spun her around and then kissed her on the lips. Then they returned to the others. Although the red-haired man could see how a red-haired girl with golden eyes stared at him, but from one moment to the next she disappeared. But he didn't know who she was, so he didn't give it any importance, and continued enjoying the evening. DxD World, 6th Heaven. In the 6th heaven there was a blonde lying in her bed sleeping, but it seemed like she was having a nightmare. Gabriel's dream. The seraph was in a forest. It was night, and she did not know where she was, but she heard a person complaining of pain and saw a certain chestnut tree fall from a tree while carrying a person. Issei, what the hell is wrong with you? Gabriel, you kidnapped me to abuse me. Issei, but what are you talking about? I didn't kidnap you, he's just looking for something that's important to me. Gabriel, don't try to fool me. Issei, you're not even using your ability to tell if I'm lying or not. Gabriel, it's not necessary, since I know what you're like. They did not continue arguing because a very powerful presence was approaching their direction, because the blonde increased her aura to intimidate the brown-haired boy but only revealed her position. Wow, they really knew how to surprise me. If it weren't for the fact that I felt that aura, I would have gone in the opposite direction. Gabriel, that presence, don't tell me it's you. Alcler, that's right, Seraph Gabriel, my name is Alcler and I'm a member of the Cows Brigade and I was the one who captured you. Gabriel, then him. Alcler, the Security's brother, from what I can see you rescued her, but it seems he rewarded you quite well. The albino was looking at the chestnut tree's open wound which was still bleeding. Issei, if I had known what kind of reward she would give me, I wouldn't have bothered to rescue her. Alcler, what can I say? Well, normally I would tell you to go away, but I was curious to know how powerful you are. Issei, are you serious? Alcler, of course I do, because I don't just go with what others say without checking it first. Issei, in that case. The brown-haired boy made a small flame appear in his right hand. The albino was about to attack but stopped when he saw how the brown-haired boy placed that flame on his wound to cauterize it. The real Gabriel went towards the brown-haired boy to stop him and heal him, but when she touched him a powerful glow cut her off. And when she saw him again, the brown-haired boy was already fighting. In a certain way, seeing that fight was impressive, but he saw out of the corner of his eye how his dream self was hiding behind some trees watching the fight. When he was about to tell him something, he heard how the fight stopped. When he turned around, he saw how the brown-haired boy was, and that time he was very hurt and tired. He tried to speak, but his voice wouldn't come out. He tried to stop him when he saw that he was preparing to give the last attack, but he couldn't move, and again he saw how the brown-haired boy received that mortal wound. After seeing that, she woke up from that nightmare. She was sweating a lot and breathing heavily. Then she turned to a small altar where Issei's swords were. They were in their sheaths and there were many lit candles. The blonde got up from her bed and walked until she was in front of the altar, so she knelt down to pray. After praying, she looked into a closet. When she opened it, there was a yellow armor with some white touches. Gabriel, I had promised not to use my weapons again unless it was an emergency, and that's why an innocent person died because of me. The blonde began to cry again, since after her Queen of Hearts returned she no longer spoke to her like before. She only spoke to her when she had to give a report or to ask for a mission. Once she was able to see inside her room, and she could see how she also had a small altar, and in it there were several photos of her with Issei. In those photos she was seen smiling genuinely, but now she is very serious, and when they speak ill of Issei in front of her she confronts and hits that person. Another person who saw that she changed a lot was Irina. Before she was very happy and energetic, but now she is very reserved and is always busy doing something to distract herself. She also heard that Rosweiss returned to Asgard, where she is cared for by her grandmother Gandil, since she has not stopped crying, since it is very different for someone to tell you that the person you love died than to see how they died in front of you. He also heard about the disappearance of the brown-haired boy's 2 girlfriends, and up to now nothing has been known about them, so he just hoped that they were okay. So with a determined look he put on his old armor, but he noticed how it was a little tight and he could see that he was already in shape. But he still put it on and went in the direction where he used to train in the past. Gabriel, because of my incompetence a person died without me being able to help him a little, but that will change now. She confidently went to her old training place. She wasn't going to allow another person to die in front of her again.
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.